Alright, YouTube, Benjamin Franklin said it best when he said that those who would sacrifice essential liberty for a little temporary security deserve neither. This is the case in the modern age, just as it was the case back in what most people would consider ancient times when our country was founded. We've lost a lot of our rights, and that's a big problem. Now, I am not an anarchist. I don't believe in anarchy. I believe that there should be a rule of law. I believe that people should enter into organizations in somewhat of a voluntarist manner, not always, because we need an economy. We need some form of government so we can have an infrastructure. Otherwise, we might as well live like cavemen and fling rocks at each other all day. So I believe in some form of government. Overall, though, lately we've been hit left and right by a bunch of nonsense, because both of the political parties in the United States are run by authoritarians. And I say it like this. The left and the right in this country, when you hear the words left or right, most individuals have been fooled into believing by their respective families, media, and surroundings, because most people are raised either, somewhat strong Democratic or Republican. I hate both of the parties. Here's why. People have been raised to trust one party, believe it's looking out for them and their rights, and that the other party is trying to take them away. That's not the case. Both parties economically want to take some of your rights and give others back. I don't have a problem with that, as long as they attend to the economy, which right now neither of them care about. They're just wasting their time on other issues. Wasting their times on drones and wars and all that nonsense. Neither of them really give a damn about how the economy goes at this point. They say they do, but they're not really working for us on that front. But both parties want to take some of your rights away when it comes to the social realm, therefore authoritarian, the opposite of libertarian, the opposite of individuals living free lives, the opposite of people being in freedom and in serenity and happiness with their fellow man, generally speaking. And those who say that libertarianism doesn't work obviously haven't studied American history, because for a large proportion of the land area of the United States, it was the going moral route for a century, back in the good old Western days, which actually weren't quite as brutal as most people seem to believe, because they killed all the criminals themselves. As we see with the Christopher Dorner case, we see one aspect of the frightening new developments in regards to our constitutional rights. Now, what are rights? They are not privileges. A privilege is something you earn, you work for, you have to keep up a certain status to attain. A right is just something that you naturally have. The founders believed, and this is the truth, that you are given the rights listed in the Constitution not by virtue of simply being a law-abiding citizen, but simply by existing. That you're intelligent, you have these rights. You're a human being, you have recognizance of your own mortality, you have the ability to recognize your own self, therefore you have the right to speak your mind. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right not to be air-holed on the spot simply because someone thinks that you did something wrong. These are rights. These are not privileges. Lately, though, and you see the media in full force saying, Dorner was a domestic terrorist, therefore it doesn't matter if they burned him alive in a cabin because he's a terrorist, so he doesn't get a trial. Sorry, but that's not the way it works. And the same holds true for the Democrats' idea of droning citizens overseas, simply because they have the label of terrorist. It holds true for citizens that are being held in Guantanamo. I would even go so far as to say it extends to individuals who are not citizens, who are captives of war and so forth. And of course, we basically ignored the Geneva Convention. We never did have much regard for international law, which is sometimes worse but often better than the United States laws. Not to say that I trust the extreme leftists in Europe very much, but I would trust them more on certain issues like not torturing people than I would my own government. The fact is this. If the government is able to label a person a terrorist, which by the way is a completely arbitrary definition, it has no real meaning anymore because it's used to apply to anybody who does anything wrong these days. You're a drug dealer, you might as well be a terrorist cartel member. You shoot somebody, you're a terrorist, you're making people afraid. Guess what? Just because they label somebody a terrorist doesn't mean we're supposed to take away their constitutional rights. It's just like this. I don't think that, for myself, I don't really like guns. I like bladed weapons more. I don't really use guns. There are guns in the house. I don't really use them. I don't really care about them. But just because I don't use them doesn't mean I want to take away other people's rights to use them, because generally speaking, and here's the big mystery that everybody seems to miss, generally speaking, guess what, America? You're safe. Generally speaking, unless you're living in the ghetto slums or right along the border, you're probably not going to get shot at. Your children are going to be fine in school. You're more likely to get hit by a bus or something like that. You're more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to get airholed. But suddenly we can label people domestic terrorists and their rights no longer apply simply because they scale us. We scaled. Uncle Sam, won't you help us? Wah, wah, wah. That's not the way it works. Just because, and court of public opinion seems to have every angle of opinion on this, despite the fact that many hundreds of thousands of us are rallying in support of our rights. Public opinion says Dorner deserved to die. What the San Bernardino police did was justice. He's still a citizen. Regardless of how much ire you regard him with, regardless of how much you detest his actions, regardless of how sure you are that he is guilty, he is still a United States citizen, and he still has constitutional rights. You can see somebody shoot off the roof of a building and kill 3 or 4 people. They still have the right to a trial. I would point out this. They didn't ID the body until 2 days after the blaze. They had the body for a day, yet they weren't sure before they ID'd it who it was. They burned somebody alive in a cabin without being certain of their identity. Well, we're pretty sure it's Dorner. We can't confirm for sure, but we're pretty sure. Guess what would have happened if that wasn't Dorner? If it was a completely unrelated person, or if he had a hostage inside? People would be up in arms. But they're not up in arms because now, of course, they know that Dorner died. I ask you this, how is that any better? They still burned how would you like it if you were allegedly did something wrong, and you didn't do it, and they burned you alive in a cabin? I would rather see people who are guilty occasionally go free, which, by the way, is rare, than people get jailed for something they didn't do, get killed for something they didn't do, just get strung up in the public square of opinion. And some people disagree with me. Some people say, well, I would rather kill a few innocent people than, let any criminals go. Guess what? Then you're just as bad as the criminals are, because you're willing to watch innocent people get killed. I thought that was what you wanted to prevent by putting them in jail in the first place. Ask, how does that make any sense whatsoever? You have the right to a trial by jury regardless of whether they label you a domestic terrorist. I would say citizens living overseas that are suspected, well, they might be working for Al-Qaeda. Might be working for Al-Qaeda. Well, are you sure? Well, we can't be positive, but we're going to send a drone in and splatter them all over the place. That's constitutionally wrong. They shouldn't be doing something like that. It's not right to deprive citizens of their constitutional rights merely by the fact that you give them the arbitrary label of a domestic terrorist. Now, what Dorner allegedly, because now we can't try him in a court, so we're always going to have to use the term allegedly killed those officers, because we can't be sure. It could be someone that looked exactly like Dorner. Maybe Dorner was actually sick at the time and somebody else did this. We don't know because he's dead. We didn't give him a trial. We weren't able to look at the evidence. Now the evidence will just sit in lockup with the LAPD in San Bernardino and we'll never see it. And 20 years from now, somebody will write a book looking back at the incident and say how terribly screwed up it was. And people will wake up and they'll say, well, after all, it was a monkey case. It makes no sense whatsoever. But by then it'll be too late. because a lot of the people that witnessed the crime will be dead. The rest of us will be too busy with our lives, and Dorner will have been rotting in the ground for 20 years. He'll be a skeleton by then, and not much of a skeleton because half of it's burned to ash. We removed his constitutional rights for no reason. Then you have the problem, as I pointed out before, of the inadequacies and inconsistencies of the story itself. First they're saying, well, we didn't light that fire intentionally. No, first they said we didn't light the fire, it was completely accidental. Then they admitted, oh, we lit it on purpose, but the purpose wasn't to keep Dorner in there and cook him alive, we wanted to smoke him out. Now, and then on the scanner it says, quite clearly, burn that motherfucker out. And then they drove him back in when he tried to get out. I don't know what's going on here. People should be concerned that the government is taking away their constitutional rights and giving them constitutional privileges. It's just like the gun control debate. Again, I don't really use guns. I don't want to take them away from other people, though. It's clearly a right that they have. They have the right to defend themselves. It makes sense. It actually lowers crime in areas where people own guns, because if a criminal gets out of hand, they shoot the criminal. I would rather see a private citizen do it, because they actually witness a crime taking place, than the police, who didn't witness anything, surround a cabin and burn somebody to death. It makes absolutely no sense at all. And then you have the problem of brutality. We see the police get out of line. You can go on YouTube and search police brutality. You'll find thousands and thousands of videos, and half of them are from the United States. We've got a swollen prison population, because the cops at this point, essentially half the people that they arrest are non-violent drug offenses. People, I waddle down the street with a crack pipe because I happen to be addicted, and they throw me in for 6 months or, 6 years or whatever. They have the problem, they put people in jail. Like, there was a story today, and I left a comment on it. Apparently, the ex-mayor of San Diego rung up $1 billion of taxpayer money gambling. She says, well, I had a brain tumor at the time, so I didn't know what I was doing. I was out of my mind. She gambles away $1 billion of money from her city. $1 billion. That's a lot of fucking money. She will probably pay back not a dime. She will probably spend not a day in jail. Yet if you illegally download a handful of MP3s, they can smack you with a $100,000 fine or 10 to 25 in jail. Does that make any sense whatsoever? No, it doesn't. The government can take down your website for little or no reason. And then when people try to resist, for instance, we got rid of SOPA. We got rid of PIPA. We got rid of a couple of other bad bills. We got rid of the cybersecurity bill. Now they've resurrected it, and it'll probably pass. It's the same thing. Now the government and the private businesses can bounce information back and forth. The businesses will know the info the government should know, and the government will know businesses that should have been kept private in servers for businesses. Long gone are the days when people are worried about Facebook sharing their info with the government. They've been doing that for years. Now every online source you use will just send seamlessly every little detail about every purchase you make, and everything you read, and what you're searching for on Google. People should be concerned about this. This is a severe breach of their civil liberties. A severe breach. This isn't a minor detail. People have a tendency, because the government doesn't think in terms of days. The government thinks in terms of decades and centuries. The government thinks way down the line. This is an expert chess player we're dealing with. They are not going to try to suddenly activate the FEMA camps and put everyone in concentration and kill all traitors and suddenly you're a police state overnight. That's never going to happen. Because when that happens, the people revolt. The idea is instead they will take a few rights at a time, and people won't notice them and they won't care because it's only a little breach. And look, we're taking away your assault rifles, but hey, now you can smoke weed. Oh great, we just got a right back, and they'll focus on that, they won't care. That's the problem. And those police that shot up the innocent civilians, guess what? They're on paid administrative leave. That means they're getting paid to do nothing right now after injuring innocent bystanders for no apparent reason. Dorner's dead in a cabin somewhere. He, killed a few people and injured a few more. His body count could have potentially been lower than the body count of the supposed good guys. And they get paid administrative leave? And I haven't even seen anything in the media about the second incident, about the dude who got run off the road and his truck got completely wasted by bullets. All you hear about is the first incident with the two Asian newspaper ladies. It's ridiculous. So to sum it up, number one, just because you don't like Dorner or you don't like X, Y, and Z, you don't like Joe Schmo out there because he shot someone, doesn't mean that you get the right to take away their constitutional rights any more than you would want yours taken away if someone alleged that you had done something wrong. Number two, it's not a partisan issue. The Democrats and the Republicans are both completely at fault for this. It takes two parties to make a truly inept, corrupt government. Number three, yeah, there are good cops out there. Mostly the beat cops, not the higher-ups. But guess what? Most of the higher-ups are completely corrupt, and they're the ones that tell the beat cops what to do. And if you've studied psychology, you know that in a group of people, if an authority figure or a pseudo-authority figure says to do something, most of the time they're going to do it, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. Number four, our rights are being trampled, as should be evident to anyone who's actually reasonable and uses their mind logically and rationally. Some of those rights you can probably live without, but do you really want to? Do you want your constitutional rights to become constitutional privileges? I don't think you do. I don't think you want to live in a society where the government can suddenly give you an arbitrary label that they themselves created that then nullifies any or all of your rights. I would even extend this so far as to say the idea of saying the mentally ill cannot own guns is very dangerous. Because remember, we're in the Ritalin generation right now. About a third of the people in the country could suddenly be termed mentally ill and barred from owning weapons. Even though they're no more violent than the rest of the population, what if you're depressed? What if you've got post-traumatic stress disorder because, you were attacked? Well, you get attacked. You try to buy a gun so that you can defend yourself in case you're attacked again. Guess what? You've got post-traumatic stress. You're not allowed to own a gun. Can you see the problem here? It's fairly straightforward. You don't want to lose your rights. People, people need to start becoming activists about this. It should spread from online to real life, protests, pickets, whatever. I wouldn't say go so far as to riot, because then you invite the police state more, because then all the mainstream people who might support your cause say, suddenly, look at those violent hippies out there beating on the cops, they're so thuggish, we should take more of their rights. Don't make it into a partisan issue, don't blame just one party. The disinfo agents love to spread that around, by the way. The people who work for large partisan businesses love to beat up on their competition by saying the other political party is the one responsible for taking people's guns or whatever. It's both of them. They're both complicit. And Christopher Dorner, regardless of what you think of him, was given a raw deal. He was never convicted of any crime and now never will be because, of course, he's been burned to cinders. Peace out.